From Hollywood actor Peter Fonda's vulgar remarks about the president's son, the first lady, and Sarah Sanders, to liberal activists celebrating last night's ambush of the Homeland Security Secretary. Tensions are boiling over with no end in sight. Trace Gallagher is looking into a few of these cases for us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Shannon, initially Peter Fonda was unapologetic for his flurry of vulgar and threatening tweets, calling Press Secretary Sarah Sanders the C word, calling for violence against Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and writing this, quoting, "We should rip Barron Trump from mother's arms and put him in a cage with pedophiles and see if mother will stand against the giant a-hole she is married to." But after a social media backlash and Secret Service inquiry, Fonda released a statement to Fox News apologizing, quote, "It was wrong and I should not have done it. I immediately regretted it and sincerely apologized to the family for what I said and any hurt my words have caused." That wasn't good enough for Barron's big brother Donald Trump Jr., who tweeted asking if Sony Pictures planned to drop Fonda from its new movie, wondering if the same rules that apply to Roseanne Barr would apply to him. Sony responded, according to Deadline, calling the tweets abhorrent and reckless, but apparently the movie goes on. Meantime, the so-called anti-fascist group Antifa tweeted out the identities and personal information like names, addresses, and phone numbers of more than 1,500 immigration and customs enforcement agents. The Daily Caller says the list was compiled and posted by far-left NYU professor Sam Levine, who also tweeted a post-Father's Day screenshot of an ICE agent and his son. And activists are now celebrating the harassment of DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen and promising that more is coming. Here's activists interrupting Nielsen's dinner at a D.C. Mexican restaurant.
How can you enjoy a Mexican dinner as you're deporting and imprisoning tens of thousands of people who come here seeking asylum in the United States? We call on you to end family separation.
CNN contributor Anna Navarro tweeted, quote, "Are there no Norwegian restaurants in Washington, D.C.? The Guardian newspaper, LA Times, Huffington Post, and ABC News also weighed in negatively. And speaking of ABC, co-host of The View's Sunny Hostin apparently thinks when it comes to human rights violations, the U.S. is up there with North Korea and Saudi Arabia.
So you can at least concede that what's going on in North Korea and Saudi Arabia is different and worse than what's going on in this country.
I think it's different. I certainly think it's different.
Finally, White House advisor Stephen Miller, the reported architect of the administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy, had his cell phone number tweeted by Splinter. That's a news website owned by Spanish-language broadcaster Univision. In response, Twitter locked Splinter's account. Shannon.
It's getting ugly out there. Trace, thank you very much. So what to make of the nonstop outrage? Well, Rush Limbaugh says this.
So hate is governing, fueling everything that is occurring in what we call the news media today. Virtually every news story today has a component driving it, which is hate.
Let's see what our panel thinks. Fox News contributor and syndicated radio talk show host Leslie Marshall, and radio host of WMAL in Washington, D.C., and associate opinion editor at the Washington Times, Larry O'Connor. Welcome to you both.
Hi.
Hi, Shannon.
Leslie, what do you make of that there's this thread of hate in most media stories out there these days?
Well, I would say that I lived through 8 years of that going the other way, and I think it's wrong either way. I think Rush Limbaugh, those in glass houses, do you remember the terrible things he used to say about Chelsea? And I want to say that specifically because I think it's abhorrent what Peter Fonda said. I think it's disgusting when spouses or children of elected officials are targeted, whether it's by the left or the right. There's absolutely no excuse for that. But I don't think that there is more hate in the media now. I think, quite frankly, this has been going on for the better part of a decade, unfortunately and sadly. We saw Ted Nugent talk about wanting to lynch President Obama, hang Hillary Clinton, and he was welcomed to the White House by our president with open arms. We have it on both sides, and it's wrong on both sides because I don't believe it represents the majority of Democrats on the left and Republicans on the right.
I will confess I do not remember the details of the Ted Nugent thing. Maybe we'll Google that real quick. But obviously, if those were the words said, everyone would disavow those. I think they should. But Larry, do you feel like the media was mean to President Obama for 8 years?
Well, not all of the media, certainly. Some of the media was critical of the president. I want to live in a country where we can be critical of the president. That's why we had a revolution in the first place. But there's critical and then there's dangerous, and the violent rhetoric has gotten way out of control. I'm sorry, you can't compare Rush Limbaugh making jokes about the appearance of Chelsea Clinton 20 years ago with Peter Fonda saying that Barron Trump should be in a cage with pedophiles. There is no comparison. It's not a tit for tat. And 2 words for you. James Hodgkinson. He is the mentally deranged man who was influenced by this kind of hateful rhetoric. There are weak-minded people out there who hear this kind of thing, who hear people saying that their president is the next coming of Hitler and that the government is fascistic and going after innocent people and ruining their lives. And a weak-minded person like James Hodgkinson took a gun and tried to kill as many Republicans as he could on a baseball field just a year ago. There will be more of that unless we all step back for a moment and recognize that we're in the same country here. We may have disagreements, but we're not Nazis.
Yeah, and there's some people who are going to be struggling with mental illnesses and other things that are going to be triggered by all kinds of things. I want to read something that was in the Chicago Tribune. John Cass writing this. President Donald Trump's opponents gleefully dropped the race card. They breathlessly accuse him of child abuse. White House immigration policy has even been compared to the death camps of Nazi Germany, as never-Trumper and former CIA Director Michael Hayden did the other day on Twitter, to his shame. Emotion is exactly what politicians want, especially if they have that media prod in their hands, the better to herd public opinion. And Leslie went on to say that both sides have been guilty of doing that.
Thank you, Shannon. I have relatives that died in the Holocaust, and I get angry when people, pull out Nazis and Hitler. But I must say, Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General, was talking about the Jews they were trying to keep the Jews in. No, they were keeping them in camps where they murdered 6 million of them and 11 million people total, approximately. So the likening of what's happening to these children here, as we've heard from people who have been in internment camps in this country, Japanese Americans like Manzanar, or relatives of mine in places like Auschwitz or Dachau or Treblinka, and the list goes on, that one of the first things that were done is children were taken from their families. Larry, I do want to say something, though, when you say about comparisons with Chelsea and with Barron. Ann Coulter talked about we should just shoot immigrants as they come over the border. Corey Lewandowski mocked a Down syndrome child being ripped from his mother's arms, and our own president mocked a disabled journalist when he was on the campaign trail.
He continues to deny that.
Well, I've seen the footage of it, but the problem is it's violence left and right. There are people in white supremacist groups that wear "Make America Great Again" hats, and that's certainly not all Republicans.
When Democrat politicians get picked off during a baseball practice, then we can start talking. As of now, we've had Republicans who are attacked for their political views by members of the fringe left. And it's not just James Hodgkinson. There have been other incidents as well. As far as I'm concerned, the violence right now is coming from the really, really angry and violent left.
Yeah, and no one wants to see any of that violence perpetrated. No sane person wants to see that against either side. And hopefully we can cool off and have civil conversations about actually finding solutions. Leslie and Larry, thank you for your civil conversation.
Thank you.